I speak now not for the sake of the living, but for the judgment of history. If these words are to outlast my bones, let them be carved into the memory of the earth, for the truth will not be softened by time. I was born in the shadow of a kingdom already rotting from within, though its banners still flew bright over the ramparts. In the year of our Lord 1287, when the winter winds carved their way through stone and flesh alike, my first breath was taken in the servants' quarter of the Eastern Keep. My father was a soldier who had seen too much blood, and my mother a healer who knew too much death. Between them I learned two things: how to endure pain, and how to watch without speaking. The king, whose name I will not honor here, was called the Leper monarch by the whispers of the court. His flesh was marked by the rot of disease, but his mind was sharp enough to wield fear as a weapon. The priests called it a curse from God. The merchants called it a sign of decline. I called it the face of truth, for what disease could rot a man faster than greed? In those days, the city below the castle walls still bustled with trade. Markets spilled their wares across muddy streets: salted fish, dyed cloth, iron nails, and the smell of roasted meat that covered the stench of sewage. Peasants worked fields they did not own, their bent backs feeding a court that laughed at their hunger. The nobility feasted on silver platters, while the king, hidden in his chamber, dined alone, avoiding the gaze of his own lords. But power in the Middle Ages was not held by hands alone. It was bound by oaths, sharpened by swords, and weighed down by chains of faith. The church was a shadow over the throne, blessing the king in public, but in secret preparing to choose his successor. I was brought into the castle's service as a boy. I cleaned armor that would later be drenched in blood. I lit torches that would one day burn villages. And all the while I listened. The king's cough grew worse with each passing winter. His fingers curled, his voice turned to a rasp, and yet he ruled with a cold precision. He sent knights to crush rebellions before they could speak. He taxed the river trade until merchants spat curses into their cups. Then came the war with the western marches. It began as all wars do, with a border dispute, with words sharper than steel. But soon our army marched west, burning wheat fields to starve their towns. I marched with them, not as a soldier, but as a squire, carrying the sword of a knight who would not survive the first siege. I have seen men die in 100 ways, with honor, without it, screaming, silent, begging for their mothers, cursing God. But I learned something on that campaign. The dead are not the worst part of war. It is the living, limping home with missing eyes, missing limbs, missing hope, who carry the real burden. The war drained the kingdom's gold and the king's strength.
He was a good king.
When he returned, he could no longer hide the decay in his face. A silver mask was crafted to cover the worst of it, but it only made the whispers grow louder. Some said he was no longer the same man. Others said the disease had reached his mind. Famine followed. Crops failed. The river froze early, and the granaries were locked for the nobility, while children starved outside their gates. I remember a winter when the snow turned red from the blood of those fighting over scraps of bread. The king did not leave his chamber. He issued decrees through trembling scribes, and then came the sickness, not the leprosy that had marked the king, but a plague that swept through the city like a black wind. Bodies piled faster than they could be buried. The bells of the cathedral tolled so often that the sound became part of the air. Priests died giving last rites. Rats feasted on the dead. It was during that time that I was sent to the king's chamber with a message. He sat alone, the silver mask on the table, his ruined face in the candlelight. His eyes were still sharp, but there was no mercy in them. He spoke to me as though he had been waiting years to be heard. "Do you see it, boy? This is what power does. It rots. Not only the flesh, but the heart. It turns kings into cowards, priests into liars, men into beasts. And yet, they will fight for it until the last drop of blood is spilled. I have ruled them with fear because love was never enough. Remember that when the throne is empty." I left his chamber with his words burning in my skull. Within a fortnight, he was dead. The silver mask lay beside his bed, and no one dared touch it. The kingdom did not collapse overnight. No, kingdoms never do. They decay like wood eaten from the inside. The lords fought over the throne. The church tightened its grip. Foreign armies tested our borders, and I became a wanderer. Years later, when I returned to the city, the castle walls were cracked, the market square overgrown with weeds, and the cathedral bells silent. The people spoke of the king as a curse, as a tyrant, as a warning. But I remembered him not as a monster, though he was one, but as a man who saw the truth of the world and dared to speak it, even if it damned him. Now I am old, and my hands shake as I write this, not from fear, but from the weight of memory. The Middle Ages have passed into legend, but I have lived them. I have seen the beauty and the cruelty, the faith and the lies, the kings and the corpses. And if you wish to know what lesson I have carried through all these years, it is this: power is never taken. It is only borrowed, and it will be taken back piece by piece until there is nothing left of you but a name in a book and a whisper in the dark. I am that whisper, and now you have heard me."
He was a good king.